So welcome to Accessing and Using OERs, OER and You. My name is Siri. I'm the coordinator for the Open Library. Joining me today is also Mary, who is the lead for the Open Library. So before we start, just a land acknowledgement. So the offices of eCampusOntario, located in downtown Toronto, are within the traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. We acknowledge and we thank the diverse Indigenous people whose footsteps have, currently do, and will continue to mark this territory. And we also ask that you consider the caretakers of the lands and the waters on which you are situated. So today on the agenda, we have a couple things that we'll be covering. The first is what is an OER? That kind of includes a conversation on 5R activities, why free matters, the various licenses you may run into when dealing with OERs, and some opportunities around OER creation and adoption. From there, we'll also be unveiling the Open Library's login portal. We're very excited about this. So that will be us today. So before we get started, just a quick little primer on what eCampusOntario is. So eCampusOntario has a vision to support Ontario and its academic institutions to be global leaders in the design of rich, inclusive, and flexible digital learning experiences grounded in an evidence-based creative understanding of learners, educators, and missions. And to that end, our mission is to imagine and co-create Ontario's post-secondary digital learning ecosystem by supporting academic institutions, educators, and learners to navigate change and deliver excellent and innovative digital learner-centric experiences. So some of our values are inclusivity, curiosity, experimentation, and creativity. And we also hope that you will also be engaging with these values and demonstrating them while you work with some OERs, should you choose to do so. So our programs and services are numerous, and just to very quickly go over them and give a quick little overview, we develop platforms, including new programs, frameworks, services, and support systems that all address sector-wide challenges. So we provide the necessary learner and educator supports to foster rich, humanized, inclusive, and successful educational experiences within the realm of virtual learning. From planning for possible futures to finding strategic partners, developing talent, through to launching new programs, eCampusOntario platforms help you navigate digital transformation in education. So there are a number of key programs. Our key programs include virtual learning strategy, the micro-credential portal, pilot programs, partnerships, framework, and more in support of Ontario's micro-credential strategy. There's also Ontario Extend, a micro-credential professional learning program for educators, the Consortium d'apprentissage expérientiel francophone de l'Ontario, or CAPFO, which is in support of Francophone student experiential learning. There's also adaptive learning, the EdTech Sandbox, Experience Design Lab, and the annual Technology and Education Seminars and Showcase. There's also Ontario Exchange and the Intellectual Property Advanced Curriculum. Please visit ecampusontario.ca to explore our other digital transformation programs, platforms, and services further. But today we will be focused on the Open Library. So the Open Library is home to over 1,200 OERs. We are the largest repository of OERs in Canada, and we support educators and learners in their creation and adoption of OERs and in the creation of open educational experiences. So we've been throwing the term OER around a lot. It's probably best to actually define what that means. So it's short for Open Education Resource. So education resource should be, I hope, relatively straightforward, but today we will be focusing on open. So a definition that gets thrown around a lot is one put forth by David Wiley, who is one of the big names in the Open Content Initiative. And his definition is that open content and open educational resources describe any copyrightable that is either in the public domain or licensed in a manner that provides everyone with free and perpetual permission to engage in the 5R activities: retain, revise, remix, reuse, and redistribute. So we'll go more into what the 5Rs are in a moment, but the thing to note here is that it's content that is either in public domain or licensed in such a way that we can all use it whenever we want. Notice I don't say however, though, as these licenses do have limitations, but the important thing is that these items are free to engage with in perpetuity. So those 5R activities, as mentioned, if you'll remember, are retain, revise, remix, reuse, and redistribute. These definitions are also from David Wiley. So we're going to go through each R. The first, I think, is relatively straightforward. It's retain. So this means you can make, own, or control a copy of the resource. So if you decide you want to, let's say, download a public domain book, you're welcome to add that to your ongoing, continually added to collection of PDFs, let's say. The next is revise. So let's say, for instance, that book is in French and you'd like to practice your translation skills. You are totally welcome to translate your copy of that resource. The third R is remix. Let's say that chapter 3 of that same public domain book that you've just translated works really, really well to highlight a concept in chapter 2 of an open textbook that you've had kicking around for a while. They fit incredibly well. Well, in that case, you can just make a mashup. Your personal collection can now include an item that is a combination of these 2 books. Maybe it even includes a 3rd or a 4th or a 5th book. We have no idea. It's your collection. You can do whatever you want. But then moving on to the 4th R, you can then reuse that resource. You can use that new packet that you've created to, let's say, teach a class, or you can put it on your website. And now let's say that your new item, this mashup, has become super popular in your field. Well, let's move on to the 5th R, which is redistribute. You can share copies of your original, revised, or remixed copy of the resource with others. So you can post it in your class, you can maybe mention it in a conference, and you maybe will have other educators around the world asking to get a copy of this remixed learning object. You can, should you choose to do so, share that copy of that resource. So retain, revise, remix, reuse, and redistribute. These 5 R's are the foundational activities of OERs. But here's the thing. I've been using the term book, but that's not all an OER is. We've got far more than that in the open library, with a list of media and file types that continues to expand and grow. From simulations to assessments to full common cartridge courses, or even podcasts or textbooks, an OER is not just a book. And it's true that some of our resources are in fact print-on-demand capable. It is worth noting that there's more to an OER than format. Really, at the end of the day, the important thing about an OER has actually nothing to do with format. It boils down to 3 things. It should be free of cost, free of barriers to access, and free to use. And free really does matter. In 2016, consider that textbook costs had gone up 88% over the past decade. That's been a few years now, and consider that prices keep rising and costs do matter. The Financial Consumer Agency of Canada in 2019 advised post-secondary students to budget $1,000 per year for required course materials. For many, that is a huge barrier to education, and student success should not be dependent on being able to afford course material. And with tuition also on the rise, we can see why student debt impacts program completion rates. It's not easy to juggle this, that, and the other thing when the price for them all keeps rising. But even if we, let's say, imagine a utopian world wherein textbooks are free, there are other reasons to use OER. And the first of which, and this is something that I do want to stress, is that you will retain full legal control of the items you create. You don't lose copyright and you don't lose legal rights over the item. It is still yours. But one of the nice things about OER creation is that it opens up avenues for collaboration. You and your potential collaborators can innovate in the ways you instruct and educate. In fact, you can even engage students in content development. Student authorship does lead to greater levels of engagement. It's also a great way to create opportunities for equity, diversity, and inclusion. You step away from traditional modes of distribution and publishing and creating, and you'll find a much more equitable landscape with opportunities to be far more inclusive in both the creation of and engagement with educational resources. And finally, service. Education systems should share learning that's happening at their schools in the final aim of benefiting their community. And keep in mind that, as we can see by, I think, the amount of people here, that community is not limited to a single campus. Education that is customized and accessible creates a base that we can all use to attain even greater heights in innovation in education. So one of the things that you'll run into quite often when interacting with OER is a Creative Commons license. So there are in fact 6 licenses composed of 4 different principles, and we're going to run through what those 4 are as well as the 6 licenses. I figure by introducing you to what the symbols and the principles are, you'll be able to read through licenses without needing to remember what a CC BY NC ND is, or at least that's how I do it, and I figure maybe it'll be of some use. So the first symbol to keep in mind is this little drawing of a person. This indicates that credit must be given to the author. You'll notice it in every single Creative Commons license ever. It's the BY or by. So this work is by someone. The next little reverse symbol indicates that adaptations must be shared under the same terms. So it's share alike, SA. From there, the equal sign just signifies that there are no derivatives or adaptations permitted. An item must be shared as is. So ND, no derivatives. And finally, the $sign crossed out to indicate that only non-commercial uses are permitted. Pretty straightforward, non-commercial, NC. So if we remember back to my example of CC, BY, NC, ND, we've got a Creative Commons, easy, BY, attribution, NC, non-commercial, ND, no derivatives. So a little bit of practice, I suppose, but you will get used to it as you engage with it more often. But there are 6 licenses in decreasing order of flexibility. We start with the very first, which, as you remember, just means attribution. So you can remix, rework, build upon, and adapt these works as you see fit. You can even use it for commercial works. From there, slightly less permissions, you've got CC-BY-SA, so attribution, as always, and share alike. If you make an adaptation, that OER is also free to use, can be commercialized, and can be remixed. From there, it's CC, BY, and C, which is attribution and non-commercial. So give credit, but don't sell it. CC, BY, and C and D is give credit, don't sell it, and you can't make any derivatives. From there, we'll move on to CC, BY, and D, which is to say that you can't adapt these. Attribution must be given, as always, but one can only copy and distribute. And then finally, we've got CC, BY, and CSA, which is give credit, don't sell it, and make sure that any derivatives or adaptations or remixes are also non-commercial. So with all this knowledge, what can you do? Well, one thing you could do is start creating OERs. The Open Library has 2 primary publishing platforms, Pressbooks and H5P. We will have workshops coming up on how to use these soon, so please keep an eye out for that. But you're also welcome to just sign up and start playing around. There's a plethora of items that already exist, and you can obviously take some of these and adapt them and create your own, assuming the license permits adaptations, of course. You can also join the Ontario Open Library Network Slack channel, which Mary will be throwing the link to in chat. You'll be able to join it and speak to other members of the OER community and the Open Library community. And if you happen to run across an OER in the wild, then please let us know. You're welcome to suggest a resource through the Open Library. We'd love to hear about it. And then finally, you can also join us in the adoption and review process, which Mary will be discussing further in a moment. So it's very exciting, so I will give that due time. But before we get started on that, we're just going to take a tiny little pivot for a second and talk about VLS. So VLS stands for Virtual Learning Strategy, and it represents collaborative, learner-driven, high-quality digital by design materials for all Ontario learners and educators. So the VLS was a result of a historic investment by the Government of Ontario that resulted in the creation of over 600 OERs. As you remember, the Open Library contains 1,209 items, and a huge chunk of this was brought to the Open Library through VLS. It also introduced a plethora of new formats. So remember that expansive list of OER types a few slides back? That's actually the result in part of VLS. VLS also spawned something else, a new license. So this is the Ontario Commons license. Our VLS collection is available through both the open licenses we just discussed, and that hopefully now you are very familiar with and can read through, and also the Ontario Commons license. This means that OCL items are eligible to Ontario educators and learners. There is a standard Ontario Commons license and then a no derivative license. They function much the same way as the Creative Commons licenses, but with a smaller scope of eligible users. So with all that in mind, I will pass it along to Mary.
Thanks, Siri. So we're really excited to share some news about a new program that Open Library is taking on and starting out this year. It's supported by the second round of funding of the Virtual Learning Strategy. This program is called Integrating OER. And the aim of the program is to support the discovery, the use, and the continuous improvements of the VLS collection. And we're doing that through OER adoptions and OER peer review. All activities that folks who are engaged with open education practices are somewhat familiar with. And we're really looking to engage with the Ontario educators in this work. Next slide, please. So in designing this program, we conducted research into the literature and evaluated our current existing practices around OER use. And from this research, we noticed several barriers. We saw that it can take a lot of time to find, evaluate, and adapt OERs for use by educators. We've also found that many educators feel like they needed more support in terms of professional development and administrative support. So keeping these barriers in mind, the Open Libraries program will support OER use in these 3 avenues. So we are being mindful to make time so that educators can engage with OER. We are looking at providing funding through direct grants, and we are also looking to provide our expertise to support your work in this area. Next slide, please. So who can get involved and what will participation look like? So eligible Ontario educators will be invited to register to participate in the below 3 areas of activities and support. So you can be an OER adopter, so wherein you will receive support on evaluating, curating, and adapting OER for your teaching. You can be an OER peer reviewer, wherein you will participate in the continuous improvement of OERs as a subject matter expert in your field, where you provide constructive feedback based on a set rubric. And the rubric has also been updated to reflect the wide range of formats that's now available because of the VLS funding. And finally, for the project creators who participated in the first round of VLS, you are also eligible to participate to make edits based on the peer reviews received for your resources and to have funding in order to support that work. You'll be able to find out more about how all of this works in our upcoming seminar on September 14th. This will be a peer review event, and also during it, we'll talk through what that looks like. You'll also hear more about this program, including reminders for deadlines, if you joined the OER network, which I had dropped a link to earlier. Next slide, please. So to get everybody situated, here are some of our fall events and deadlines. You can take a look at the 3 main events wherein the Open Library team will be supporting these various areas of work. And you'll also see that there are deadlines to apply to participate. So the registration forms will be live later in September, along with some important information about eligibility, as well as the amounts of the grants that are available. I'm going to drop some links into our chat here. Here you go. Let me, please find the registration link now in the chat for our September 14th workshop. That one in particular is a great one to engage in if you'd like to learn more about what it means to be an OER peer reviewer. Also, it will be an opportunity to engage with the updated criteria of peer review. And you'll see that the deadlines to apply are a little bit further after each of the events. So you can get an opportunity to engage a little bit with what this program means and still have time to register your intentions to participate. And that way we'll also be able to engage with Ontario educators who want to apply directly and maybe don't have time to attend the workshops themselves. There will be more information available later on. Next slide, please. And I will be turning it over to Siri to go through the new login portal, which will be an opportunity for folks to particularly engage with the Ontario Commons license items.
All right, thank you, Mary. So yes, as Mary just mentioned, we will be going through the Open Library's new login portal. So I'm just going to switch to the correct slide, or sorry, the correct screen. So if I could just get confirmation that you can see welcome to the Open Library, our homepage. Awesome, thank you so much. All right, so one of the ways that you can search through the Open Library is just going through and searching keywords. But in this case, we're actually just gonna browse all educational resources. But before we do that, one of the things I do wanna just bring attention to is the fact that we do have a login register button, and this is sort of the crux on which much of this revolves. So just keep that in mind. You don't have to go through all of these steps. You can just bypass searching and just go straight to login. But in this case, we're gonna pretend that we are just looking through an educational resource and we just wanna access it. So in this case, I'm going to just filter by license. So in this case, we're just scrolling down on the side here by filters and going all the way down at the bottom to licenses. So as you'll remember, one of the new licenses that came out as a creation of VLS is the Ontario Commons license. So in this case, we're going to go with no derivatives. And here you can see that there are 28 results found. So there are 28 items in the open library currently that have an Ontario Commons license, no derivatives. So we're going to pick one of these and we're going to just pick thriving in the classroom, let's say. So we're going to click through it. And typically, if I wanted to read it or download an item, I do have to log in. So let's say you are looking at a resource and it is not a Creative Commons. This is one of the steps that you will take, and particularly if you are an eligible Ontario educator or learner. So it's telling me to log in. So you can click through there, or you can also click at the very top. So just a reminder, as I very quickly, let's see how quickly my internet goes. So login register is also available up top on the right here, but we're gonna just log in. So in this case, we already have an account, but I'll walk you through account creation since I figure many haven't created an account yet. And that's part of what today is about, is just showcasing that you can sign up now. So we'll click through that link. So one of the things you'll be doing is just entering your email address. So we do ask that you only use your institutional emails. A reminder that only eCampusOntario member institutions are eligible. So please don't use your personal Gmail. If you are a U-Windsor professor, use at U-Windsor. If you are a student at U of T, use your University of Toronto, University of Guelph, or Seneca College. Any of these member institutions, use your institutional email, please. From there, create a password. The standard requires a minimum of 8 characters. You can read through the password requirements at your own leisure. Enter your name, last name, and select your institution. So there is a drop-down list of member institutions. So feel free to pick whichever one you belong to, really. And from there, your role and title can be specified, agree to the terms of service, do the CAPTCHA, make sure you're not a robot, and then create your account. You will then be prompted with another email to just confirm everything. But in this case, we've already done that and we already have an account. So I will just sign in through the eCampusOntario login portal. So we're going to do that. And then we're back at Thriving the Classroom, a digital toolkit to support resilience. So this OER seems really interesting. So I've actually saved it here, but let's say, so I'm going to just exit out of this, saved items. All right. So let's say I hadn't saved it yet. And in this case, I wanted to. I know I don't have the time today to go over it, but it seems really interesting. And I want to look at it tomorrow when I have a little bit of time. So one thing that can be done is you can just save it for later, at which point you will get back to that list and it'll be in your saved items. But the important thing that we want to focus on is the fact that you can now access downloading and reading it without having to email us. So previously you did have to email open at eCampusOntario, but now thankfully member institutions and members of member institutions can sign in and access the plethora of wonderful content that is included in the VLS collection, including all items that have Ontario Commons licenses. So from here, it's just an issue of downloading it. In this case, it's an accessibility review. You'll be brought to a page that just lets you know that your download has started. We can see that that has happened. I've got it downloaded and I can access it. I can also choose to read it online should I want to do so. But this is just really to indicate that it's a much more streamlined process to access VLS items. You are able to do so without having to email, and you can create an account and you can curate a list of saved items. So if you know for a fact that there are 15 different items you want to look at this weekend when you finally have a chance to breathe, you can do so, and you can go back and consult it at any point you would like. So that's it for the login portal demo. So I will just switch back to slides real quick. All right. So finally, right before we move into our Q&A period, we just want to take a moment to let you know how we at the Open Library and we at eCampusOntario can support you. So we provide training for Pressbooks, H5P, and general OER. We will have general Pressbooks and H5P webinars coming up soon, but if you'd also like targeted workshops or webinars or sprint sessions, please contact us at open@ecampusontario.ca. Mary, if you could throw that in the chat just so people have the right email. Feel free to reach out to us. We also provide a platform and opportunity to build connections. So one of the things that was mentioned was the Slack channel. So please feel free to join us. You can participate as much or as little as you'd like, but you are very welcome to join. We also provide materials and resources to support OER advocacy. And finally, we do have analytics. So if you're really curious to know, let's say, how much students have saved, we have that number. It's over 15 million, just a fun little fact, maybe a bit of a spoiler. But we have data on OER adoptions in Ontario and specific OER usage data. So this is something that might be of use from an advocacy perspective, or even if you're just really curious.